Hey there, everyone. I'm Lux, and this is True Crime with Lux. So today I'm going to be discussing the case between Rebecca Burkowski and Joshua Aide. Now, Rebecca started seeing Joshua while they were both enlisted in the Marines. They both were high-ranking and stationed in different areas, so they were mostly long distance. But when they were together, they would break up and then just get back together, and they would do this over and over again. Also, Joshua was married during this to a woman named Samantha. Now, Rebecca knew that he was married, so they kept the relationship a secret till he was finally divorced. When he was divorced, the two moved in together in Monticello, Wisconsin, but their relationship was still toxic. Their fighting got especially bad in May of 2019. The couple were fighting over whether or not Joshua should sell his father's house after he had passed away. Rebecca wanted him to sell it along with some items of value so that they could buy a house of their own, but Joshua wanted to keep the house to rent it out for passive income. Joshua said during this time, Rebecca was addicted to prescription meds. She would have mood swings, he said, that got really bad. Rebecca said the issues in their relationship was actually Joshua. She said he was controlling, possessive, and would physically abuse her. She said he had a drinking problem. So the two just constantly blamed each other over their relationship issues. During one of their fights, Rebecca tried to just leave, and Joshua tried taking her keys from her and shoved her, leaving her with bruises on her arms and scrapes on her back. Anytime they fought, it got bad. Rebecca would try to leave to get away from him, and Joshua would physically stop her every time. One of their fights got so bad one time that a friend of Joshua's actually had to step in so Rebecca could get away. It was also discovered that Rebecca wasn't the first person he had abused. It's said that he also hurt his ex-wife, so this was a pattern for Joshua. Eventually, Rebecca did move out, but the two still dated long distance. But she felt safer being farther away from him. She had moved back in with her parents, James and Julie. They were now in their late 50s, and James was a great husband and father. Her parents would do anything to help Rebecca, and she was trying to find a safe way to break up with Joshua. On October 3rd, 2018, she sent a text to Joshua saying, "I really have nothing to lose, I guess, except maybe my life. Maybe your temper, anger, rage, being drunk all the time. You try to control me, you put your hands on me, you cheated on your wife with me." Even after sending this text, they still stayed together for another year. Until March of 2020, Rebecca finally broke up with Joshua for good. They had now been together for 5 years at this point, but Joshua wasn't going to let her go so easily. He constantly texted her trying to convince her to get back together, saying he'd change and things would be better. Rebecca stood her ground and refused to get back together. This only made Joshua more angry, and he began accusing her of dating other men, which, if she was, that was her right to do. She broke up with him so she could date whoever she wanted, but Joshua just kept texting her and getting jealous and possessive. Rebecca once bought a new Jeep, and Joshua texted her demanding she tell him how she paid for it, asking if she had a new boyfriend that helped her pay for it. She told him that she had bought it on her own. No one helped her, but Joshua didn't believe her. So he then asked her if she would at least tell him if she did have a new boyfriend. She avoided it because it was none of his business, which he then said the fighting was her fault for not sharing her personal information with him. During one of their text exchanges, Rebecca straight said his behavior was abusive. He then turned it around, saying she was the abusive one for calling him a drunk and causing his divorce. He just blamed her for everything, saying it was all her fault. He said he helped her a lot, like that made it okay for him to beat her. Now, you would think at this point, Rebecca would just block him, stop interacting with him, but she still had things that belonged to him that she was desperately trying to give back so that they could be done for good. There was a 1978 Chevy Tahoe that was the cause of a lot of their fights. They had bought it when they were together, but when they broke up, it was at Rebecca's parents' house. The plan was, when they had bought it, was that they'd fix it up together because it needed a lot of work. Since they broke up, Rebecca had been trying to give it to Joshua. However, they couldn't seem to find a good time to hand it off. You see, the radiator needed to be replaced, so driving it wasn't an option. Joshua said he would come over and just fix it, but Rebecca didn't want him at her house, so she told him she would just find a mechanic to fix it up. Now, this made him mad, and he may have realized that once that vehicle was fixed, he had nothing else to communicate to Rebecca about. So Rebecca ended up reaching out to a family friend named John Miller to have him do the repairs. Joshua argued with her about this because John wasn't an actual mechanic, and for some reason he also was jealous of John. He went so far as to accuse Rebecca of being interested in John. None of that was true. In reality, Rebecca hadn't even met John. The only reason she knew of him was because John's wife was a good friend to Rebecca's mom. He had only agreed to help as a favor for them. Joshua was pissed. He called and texted Rebecca, saying he forbade her from letting anyone else touch his vehicle. She ignored him and said, "Don't worry, I have it taken care of." She said John would do all the repairs that day. It was August 4th of 2020. Joshua then asked for John's contact info, and she gave it to him willingly. This was not a good idea, though, because Joshua then started calling John, telling him not to touch it, and I don't want you working on the vehicle. Rebecca then texted Joshua, saying he was being ridiculous, to which he responded, "John must be sitting next to you." Rebecca told him he needed to just stop and that they weren't getting back together. They had too many issues. Joshua ignored this text and just said, Is he sitting next to you?" She responded saying still being abusive and controlling and intimidating. Joshua said he was not, so Rebecca told him to just leave her alone. Throughout the day, Joshua called her over 40 times. She stopped answering and let John know that Joshua might show up at the house. Because he told her if he showed up and John was there, there'd be trouble. He told her not to touch the car. Rebecca could tell he'd been drinking, and soon Joshua changed his tone and said, "If you need any help, just let me know." To which she replied, "All right, I'll let you know." You would think that would be the end of the conversation. But later, Joshua said he took her response to mean that she wanted him to come over. So he got in his car and he started making his way to Rebecca's. The drive from his place to Rebecca's parents' house is about 2.5 hours. The entire drive, he kept calling her. She refused to answer. During the drive, he ended up calling her 39 times. Joshua kept calling until he actually got to the house. John was working on the car when Joshua pulled up. Rebecca and her dad were helping. The Tahoe was in the garage and they had been working on it for a few hours, so the garage door was open. Now, only the people there know exactly what happened, but when Joshua left the house, Rebecca's dad was dead. Rebecca and John had both been shot in the head, but were still alive. The neighbor called 911, but didn't know what had happened. When police arrived, Rebecca and John told them that Joshua had shot them. Rebecca told them that they were all working on the car when Joshua pulled up and walked to the garage. She said she could tell he was drunk, and he said, "Hey, boo, what are you doing?" Rebecca said she ignored him because she didn't want to deal with him. She said she started cleaning up the tools, and when she looked up at Joshua, she had a gun pointed at her face. She said, "What the fuck?" right before he pulled the trigger. She turned her head at just the right moment that the bullet hit her ear and actually lodged in the back of her head. She was severely injured, but still alive. Joshua then shot Rebecca's dad, James, in the head, and he immediately fell to the ground. He then shot John in the head, who was actually able to run to the neighbors afterwards, where he asked them to call 911. John watched from the neighbor's house as Joshua got back in his truck and drove away. John then went back to the garage and could tell that Rebecca was still alive. John waited for police, and when he saw them, he walked over to talk to them, but they were more concerned about his injuries, and they tried to give him medical treatment. But John tried to tell them that Rebecca needed more help than him. She needed a doctor, and the shooter was getting away. When they got to Rebecca, she was able to tell them who had shot her. Later at the hospital, police questioned Rebecca more, and she said that she was worried he would hurt someone else and that they should really go check on his ex-wife to make sure she was okay. Rebecca then found out that her dad didn't survive. Police soon started searching for Joshua, and they put an alert out for his truck. Meanwhile, Joshua was making his way back home. He stopped on the way to get a 6-pack of beer that he then proceeded to drink 5.5 to settle his nerves. Police had his number and actually called him to let him know that he was wanted. Joshua answered and told them he had no idea what they were talking about. He continued driving home and called his friend, the same friend that actually had intervened in one of his and Rebecca's fights when they were still together. Joshua told him that he killed them all. Joshua's story to his friend was not the same as what Rebecca and John had told the police, though. Joshua admitted to shooting all of them and believed they were all dead, but he said it was in self-defense. 2 hours after the shooting, Joshua returned home where the police were waiting for him. They arrested him and he was stumbling and obviously drunk. He said he had no idea why he was being arrested and he didn't understand why they thought he was involved. Joshua maintained his innocence. During the search of his car, they found a gun that matched the one from the crime scene. They also found an open beer in the console and empty cans everywhere. Once back at the station, Joshua refused a breathalyzer test, so there's no saying just how drunk he truly was. His trial began in the summer of 2021. Police built their case and got the phone records between Rebecca and Joshua. They also got the ballistic reports and forensic evidence. They had witnesses to Joshua's controlling behavior and abuse towards Rebecca. With all of this, Joshua and his lawyer maintained that the shooting was in self-defense. Joshua said when he went to Rebecca's, he had no intention of doing something violent. He said he was invited over, and when he got there, Rebecca's dad, James, attacked him. Joshua claimed that James kept shoving him, and then John joined in. Joshua then said John picked something up and tried to bash him in the skull. He said he then saw Rebecca aim a gun at him. They were trying to kill him for his life insurance since Rebecca was still the beneficiary. So according to Joshua, this was all a trap to kill him. So he had no choice but to defend himself and shoot them. However, his story made no sense to the court after all of the evidence the prosecutor had presented. Now, there was also the fact that when Joshua was arrested, they photographed him. And he had no injuries on him that would show he was attacked or had to defend himself in any way. Now, keep in mind that when he was arrested, he claimed he had no idea about the shooting, but now he's claiming it was in self-defense. There were a few discrepancies in Rebecca and John's statements, though. Rebecca owned a few guns, and during the search of the house, police had missed one that had been on the couch behind a pillow. She did call them to let them know that they had missed one, and she turned it over for evidence, but Joshua's defense used this, saying she was hiding evidence and the gun was proof that she was going to shoot Joshua. Now, to me, it is a bit weird that there was a gun there, but if Rebecca was trying to hide it, why would she let police know that she still had it and then turn it over to them? So the defense is trying to say that after Rebecca was shot in the head, she then went into the house to hide her gun, then after being released from the hospital, decided to give it to police for evidence. Now, kind of sounds weird to me. And wouldn't there be blood all over the house considering that she was shot in the head? It doesn't really make sense. So his defense then took another route and tried to get Joshua clemency due to his time serving in the Marines, and that he couldn't be held responsible due to mental disease or defect. This is them believing that Joshua suffered from PTSD. But the evidence against him was airtight, so no matter what the defense came up with, Joshua was going to be held responsible. He was finally found guilty of first-degree intentional homicide for the murder of James, and 2 counts of attempted first-degree intentional homicide for Rebecca and John. He was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility for parole, plus 80 years. The judge never wanted Joshua to get out of prison, saying he was unable to be rehabilitated. Thank you all for listening to today's episode. I really appreciate it. I hope you have a great day and you stay safe, and I will be talking to you next week.